And welcome everyone to another episode of Love Up or Shut Up right here on AngryMarks.com. My name is Peter H. I'm joined once again by my co-host from Omaha, Nebraska, Stevie J.
What's up?
Not much. I finally got my voice back after 2 weeks of sounding like someone on the Muppet Show, so that's good news. For those, as the day of this recording, it looks like the lockdown here in the province of Ontario, the restrictions are going to be lifted by the end of the month, so we could be back to somewhat normalcy. I don't know, like it'll be 50% capacity at the gyms and the restaurants, but it's one step closer than we're at right now, so I'll take the win. I'll take the W.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know that case numbers are peaking or they're getting better now, so I'm hopeful. You kind of have to be hopeful as we approach the second half of this month going into February. I mean, we've got some big cards coming up in February. We've got the Olympics in February. We've got a whole bunch of stuff on the go in the next 3 months, Stevie. And, it could be positive 2022. Who knows?
Who knows?
But this week we're going to talk UFC Fight Night. That was at the Apex in Vegas, which, boy, oh boy, they need to talk to that My Pillow guy for a sponsorship. I swear to God.
I thought you wanted it to be sponsored by 5 Hour Energy because it was putting you to sleep.
Oh, that too. They can both sponsor it for all I care. We're going to preview this weekend's UFC, and then next week's show, Bellator takes center stage as Bellator comes back on January 29th, the same day as the Royal Rumble, with Bader against Moldavsky.
I mean, I like the sound of that card, and I'm looking forward to watching it, but when you say they take the center stage, are you being really for true with that? Because I don't know that Bellator is the center stage, even when they're the center stage. You know what I mean?
Well, the only other show MMA on my calendar here for the 29th is CFFC out of Philly, which is
Right.
on Fight.
I'm saying they are because they're unopposed, so to speak. But
Yes.
even when they're unopposed, they're still number two. I mean, they're never. I'm trying not to. How do I put it? I don't want to dog them, but I also don't want to overrate them. You know what I'm saying?
If they're not a 1 and 1A, there's a 1 and 2 discrepancy.
Right. And they're a very solid number two. They're the best number two they could possibly be.
And well, we'll talk more about Bellator next week, but let's talk about what happened on ESPN this past Saturday. Qatar and
Chikadze
in the main event, and well,
it was a unanimous decision, and there was at least one 10-8 round in there. It was a pretty one-sided ass whooping by Qatar.
We don't use one-sided a lot in a main event. Mm-hmm. We see it on occasion, but not to this degree.
Well, I mean, it wasn't extreme. It wasn't like every round was a 10-8 round. It wasn't like Chikadze was not a quality athlete. It was just one guy was clearly better than the other guy. It's not like the other guy sucks.
But at the end of this card, we had 10 fights, 8 going to decision, 7 were unanimous. It was a long, long night of fights.
Right, but at least on the main card, 2 of those fights were a finish.
That is true. Brandon Royval beat Rogerio Von Toren with a split decision, and Jake Collier beat Chase Sherman via submission.
Don't too often see heavyweights doing submissions. Once in a while you get the guys who are really adept at it, like your Frank Mears, but not so often in UFC do you see heavyweights put on a rear naked choke.
So, the top 3 fights, we had a unanimous, a split, and a submission.
Mm-hmm.
You take those 3 fights off of the card, the only other fight that really had any definitive to it was Borshev beating Bush knockout at 3:47 of the first round.
See, I disagree with that. I think Caitlin Chikagian and Jennifer Maia, I think a 30-27 across the board was a statement. She was basically saying, I am the person who deserves to get a title shot in this division because nobody else is coming close to me. Like, you want to put somebody up in the division? I'm the next batter up. Even though I've lost to Valentina Shevchenko before, it doesn't matter. I'm top dog around here.
So the thing about that fight, Stevie, I'm glad you brought that up. You know what you need if you want to be in title shot contention? If you want to be a title contender, you know what you need in the promotion?
What?
A contract.
Oh, was that her last fight under contract?
Yep.
Well, then the people who are currently in charge of that in UFC would be fools to not sign her, because if they let the current, number 2, number 1, what is her ranking? What did it update to as of this card? I voted, but I didn't look to see where she moved to, so I'm pulling it up.
I was surprised.
I'm pulling it up right now, and she didn't move up or down. She is still number 2 in the division, and obviously they think she's sticking around, or they would have pulled her out of the rankings, right? Because when people's contracts run out and they're not staying, there's a notice when I do the rankings, and it says you must rank at least 15 fighters, which means that somebody is no longer in the division. So they obviously think she's staying, and they'd be fools not to keep her, because the first thing Bellator would do is give her a title shot. They would sign her and give her a title shot immediately.
And again, we have that argument about giving someone a guaranteed title shot off the top.
Well, seriously, as good as she is, I mean, what are you going to say? The only persons better than her are Shevchenko, who she's lost to, and the Bellator flyweight champion, which is currently Juliana Velasquez. So if you want to give her a number 1 contenders fight instead of a title fight, let her fight the former champ, Ilima-Lei Macfarlane. And that way it's a no-lose scenario, because Macfarlane wins, she gets the rematch. Or Chikagian wins, then she's earned the title shot because she just beat the former champ. But I'm fantasy booking for something that I don't think is going to happen anyway, because again, they'd be really stupid to just let her walk out and walk into Bellator with her record and her standing. But they've done stupid things before, so it's not out of the realm of possibility.
Remember we talked about this last week, where she went to decision, she would set the record?
And she set the record.
And in the post-fight, here's a quote. When she was asked about this, I just hope that I'm still a UFC fighter after this performance.
Well, she can say that because she wants to look humble to the members of the media that are there, and she wants to look humble to Dana White when he's doing the negotiating. But she has nothing to be ashamed of. A win is a win. A ranking is a ranking. You're still the top dog. Whether you win by decision, knockout, or submission, you are who you are.
I saw this comparison a few times during the fight. They were comparing her to another fighter that always went to decision.
John Fitch? Yeah, I told you that last week. We had that discussion last week.
But I was like, this is like, either like fans are listening to the show and tweeting about it during the fight, or it's just like this is a consensus thing where it's like
great minds think alike. I would say that's the reason.
Probably. I'm just wondering, the last quote I saw about Dana White saying they'll talk on Tuesday, but we haven't heard anything yet as of this recording. So
as they used to say on the Great Space Coaster, no news is good news.
Let's see. The other fight on the main. I don't know why I find that funny. I just do.
Did you watch that show as a kid, or am I that much older than you?
Yes. Not that much older. Come on now.
So you've seen the Great Space Coaster, then?
I've heard of it, yes.
You've heard of it, but you've never actually seen it.
Oh, I've heard of it. A lot of people have referred to me as an old soul. You've called me an old soul at times, for crying out loud.
So you probably have only seen it in Family Guy when they parodied it.
Yes. Bill Alijo beat Joe Anderson Brito, unanimous decision. That's the main card. The prelims, all unanimous decisions. Court McGee, Brian Keller, TJ Brown, and Jamie Pickett won their respective fights.
Yep, and the fight bonuses were $50,000 to Qatar and Chikadze for the fight of the night, and the performance bonuses went to Jake Collier and Vyacheslav Borishev. So basically, the two guys who got finishes on the main card got the bonuses. And I'm sure you're appreciating that, given that you didn't like this quote-unquote snooze fest of a 5-hour energy-needing show.
The one thing I saw about this, TJ Brown being Charles Rosa, unanimous decision on the first fight. Charles Rosa's seen better days.
Yeah, I kind of thought that would be a pink slip fight for him, because he's lost 3 of his last 4 now, 4 of his last 5, 6. He needed to win, and the fact that he didn't, not boding well for his future.
We'll see what happens, but I mean, McGee and Keller, those are still named fighters. Still winning on the... So.
Yeah. In fact, dare I say, it's kind of nice to see Court McGee still around at 37 years old after how long he's been in mixed martial arts, let alone in UFC. I mean, this is a guy that fought back in 2007 that is still active in 2022. 15 years is a long time in this sport.
Yeah. Yeah, well, look at Randy Couture.
Well, yeah, there's like being a 5 or a 10-year or a 15-year guy, and then there's being Randy Couture, who's just a freak of nature, a once-in-a-lifetime.
But Court is in that same category as the Miller brothers.
Yeah, he's dependable. He's the guy that you can always call, that's going to make the weight, and it's going to take the fight, and it's going to do the job.
Yeah. And not do the job as a pro wrestler.
No, not being a carpenter, not that kind of job. Not the job where you show up, do the work, and you get paid. No, he's going to show up and fight.
Not a mechanic.
No, he's not going to come in there and lay down on the mat.
Let's move on to this weekend's pay-per-view, first of 2022, main event, heavyweight title on the line. Cyril Gane against Francis Ngannou.
Yep, interim title versus heavyweight title, unification of the titles.
Yeah, unification. Well, there can be only one.
Mm-hmm. Who do you think the one will be?
Oh, I'm not sold on Gane. I think Ngannou will beat him by knockout in the second round.
I think Gane is good enough to be where he is. He's 10-0 for a reason. He beat Derek Lewis for a reason. He's not undeserving, okay? Mm-hmm. Let's just put it like that. But he lives in a world where Francis Ngannou exists, and no matter how good you are when Francis Ngannou shows up, that's a problem. Because nobody in the heavyweight division strikes like he strikes, with the possible exception of Derek Lewis. And Francis Ngannou has the cardio and the physique that, God bless, Derek Lewis does not.
Ngannou, the reason it's a unification is because he wanted time. And Dana White wouldn't give it to him.
Right.
And
he basically pulled, since you've already brought pro wrestling into this, he basically pulled the Vince McMahon power play where you ask for time off and Vince just gives you your release because he's like, fuck you, no, I'm not giving you time off.
Yeah, mental health break be damned. Mm-hmm. Ngannou on a full fight camp, student of the game, I think he's going to...
Tango has an opinion on this fight. Yes, Tango, what do you think? Oh, really? Well, that's a good pick. I'll go with that. Now you can continue.
Ngannou is a student of the game, and I truly think that he's going to find something in Gane that no one else has in his armor. And Ngannou's speed, I don't think it's underrated now. I think it's on everyone's radar.
Mm-hmm.
And he is powerful. Like, obviously, you're not heavyweight champion, not powerful, but he's got that dominant striking ability that I don't.
You know what I would factor in if you're doing the equations and running the math here on the scenarios?
Yeah.
Just take into consideration that he is an extreme couture athlete, and you just talked about Randy Couture. Who better to learn how to be the best athlete possible in the heavyweight division than the man who beat guys twice his size to become heavyweight champion? If you can't learn how to pick apart the holes in somebody's game from Randy Couture and the coaches at his gym, then you ain't in the right business, because if you're around him, you're going to learn.
Now, Ngannou is giving up a height in this fight, but he's also the heavier fighter.
Right. And that's why I say this is where that conditioning and cardio and stamina is really going to be the factor, because even though he might be the heavier man and even though he might be the shorter man, he will be the fresher man.
Yeah. His gas tank is pretty good.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of good gas tanks, Brandon Moreno and Davison Figueiredo, those are two guys who could go for 10 rounds if they wanted to. Yeah, it's funny that we're going to such polar extremes on the same card, but at the same time, you can't pick two more exciting fights than that. If you like Fast and Furious, then you've got the flyweights, and if you like seeing the big boys, then you've got the heavyweights.
And we joke sometimes saying quicker than a hiccup. I mean, this fight could be over like blinking your eyes.
Or it could go the distance with them just slugging it out for 25 minutes. 30 if you count the minute between rounds. I mean, it could be a barn burner all the way to the end.
True. It could be. I have Figueiredo winning this, but man, I'm looking forward to this.
I am not counting Moreno out. You know what? He proved, once again, it's like what I said about Cyril Gane. He proved he deserves to be where he is. He went to a draw with Figueiredo the first time, and he submitted him the second time. So why am I going to bet against him the third time? I'm not.
Okay.
I know Figueiredo is... See, okay, let me break it down like this. When we talk about Ngannou and Gane, I'm like, Ngannou is the clear number one when he's around, and nobody else can even claim to be.
Mm-hmm.
With Figueiredo, I'm not so sure about that. Because if he went to a draw with Moreno the first time and lost the second time, are you really still the top dog? I think maybe Moreno is the top dog now.
If I'm Figueiredo, I'm pissed off.
Well, that's why they make the fights, right? That's what we'll find out on Saturday.
This is where the casual fans' interest dips, but the hardcore fans, they'll stay around, because you've got Michel Pereira and Andre
Filo.
You've got Cody Stamann and Said Nurmagomedov. And you've got Rodolfo Vieira and Wellington Turman. Not a pay-per-view type card, in my opinion. What say you?
You know what? In the era of coronavirus, you've got to work with what you have at the time that you have it.
And this show is in Anaheim. It's not at the Apex, so maybe there is a COVID argument to be made. Because we saw that, was it last week, when all those cancellations and card modifications came into play? So, on the prelims, we got Charles Jourdain against Ilya Topuria. Who else on here Ronnie Barcelos and Victor Henry, Trevin Giles and Michael Morales. Jack Della Maddalena against Pete Rodriguez. Those are the late prelims that started at 8. The early prelims started at 6. And the only name I recognize on the early prelims is Kay Hansen on the opener against Jasmine Jasudavicius.
Let me see what I think of these. Matt Frevola is a name you should know if you don't. Trevin Giles is a name you should know if you don't. Hane Barcelos is a name you should know if you don't. There's some decent fighters on these prelims. Maybe not names the filthy casual will know, but it's not like they're bad fights. They're just not big name fights.
I mean, these are prelims from a pay-per-view, so you watch the prelims and you try. It's the last sell job to get eyeballs to buy the pay-per-view. This is the other problem.
Well, I think the Hane Barcelos fight, that could be one that would sell people on it because, look, the guy's got 16 wins out of 18 fights, 8 knockouts, 2 submissions. This is a guy who's very dynamic, and he lost his last fight by majority decision, and you know how you said earlier that Figueiredo would be pissed off? If you're Hane Barcelos, you gotta be pissed off right now. You gotta want that one back. You want to get back in the win column badly.
But if you look at the 5 pay-per-view fights, are those 5 fights a $75 pay-per-view card?
Okay, the amount of things I spend $75 on to watch on pay-per-view is minuscule to begin with, so the answer is no. However, if I was to go to a sporting establishment and they were showing the card and I could order food and drinks and spend half that money, I would.
Yeah, this is a pub or bar.
Yeah, it's a pub show. It's a bar show.
I can see that. I can totally see that. I don't know. There's going to be some 75, so that's a lot of money now for UFC pay-per-view.
And it's not a $75 event to you or me, but you know what? Dana isn't worrying about us. He's worrying about the people who are marks for Francis Ngannou and want to see him knock somebody out of their shoes and socks. And there's probably at least 500,000 people who are willing to pay $75 for that.
Well, let's move on to the news, and we've got a couple of big fights in May that are going to be fun as Yaroslav Amosov, his first title defense, will be in London, England.
Against MVP Michael Venom Page.
That is going to be fun.
London calling.
That's at the SSE Arena in Wembley.
I'm sure MVP will get a huge reaction for that fight.
And to update a story from last week, Stevie Misha Tate is going down to 125, and they've already booked her opponents.
Who?
Lauren Murphy.
Ooh, that's a tough test.
That is a very tough test.
Yeah, they're not letting Cupcake get a cupcake in her debut in the division. What's so funny about that? That's her nickname.
Cupcake and use cupcake twice in the same sentence. It made me laugh. I don't know why.
Yeah.
So we could go on this next one for 20 minutes, but I just want to get your basic point on this.
All right.
In on the UFC changing their COVID-19 policy for those who are vaccinated.
I think every sports league has done that at this point.
Basically, for those who don't know, UFC is no longer need to test or quarantine outside of a pre-PCR test or an antigen test. This is starting with UFC 270. Proof of vax will be required. Individuals will be reimbursed for any costs incurred. Unvaxxed will still need to test and quarantine on fight week. They'll test twice on site, once on arrival at the host hotel and once Thursday of fight week. That flies in the... Well, it changes from previously where they only tested once on arrival and once on weigh-in day.
Seems all reasonable to me.
Just seems like they're a little bit relaxing of the rules, which...
at this point, I don't have a problem with that.
Well...
It's, if the Supreme Court and their recent ruling has taught us anything, it's that you can't mandate that a person who works for an employer should be vaccinated. Everybody's got to make their own choices.
Well, somebody who made really poor choices is Carlos Felipe. He's out for a year and a half.
Okay.
Tested positive for boldenone, which is an anabolic steroid.
Oh, man. Well, you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes.
Yeah, I was just like, I haven't seen a steroid failure in a while, but okay, we'll take that, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
UFC is going back to London on March 19th at the O2 Arena. Looks like it's a fight night card. Jake Hadley and Alan Nascimento looks to be the main event, but that could change between now and then.
I think that's Nascimento, but whatever.
Yeah. No big names here as of yet, but again, it's.
Well, you talk about cards 3 months in advance, and who the fuck knows if any of the fighters that you do talk about are even going to be on it.
Well, the last time they were in London was Darren Till and Jorge Masvidal. Remember that one?
Yeah, I remember a lot of fireworks.
Well, for one fighter, yeah.
Backstage particularly.
Yeah, that's a well-known story. It's just, I think Darren Till, we're still worried about his mental health, but I remember his mental health in 2019 when that fight happened, and it was scary. It was a scary place for him. I'm sure he's not looking back fondly at that one.
Well, there's a lot of fighters who we could worry about their mental health. I mean, Darren Till, Conor McGregor, John Jones. What?
Mike Perry.
Yeah.
Mike Perry.
Yeah. I mean, you don't have a shortage of names in this sport of people who have concerning patterns of behavior. But then again, you look at any sport with a high degree of physical contact, that's going to crop up. NBA, NFL, hockey, you're going to have some troubled athletes.
And I saw this, a friend of mine mentioned this, Carla mentioned this, a friend of mine. She said the Texas State Athletic Commission is no longer requiring a license for seconds.
So Joe Schmo off the street could second a fighter. I guess. If that's what they want to do, then that's what they're going to do. It seems ridiculous, but why not? It's Texas. Whatever.
So, remember how I mentioned that in Ontario there's restrictions? Right now it's a modified step, level 2 they're calling it.
Yeah.
Well, there was a letter sent, I want to make sure I get the right name here, from the Ministry of Heritage, Sport, Tourism, and Culture Industries, saying that training for MMA, you're not exempt from provincial restrictions. So the gym, even the MMA gyms are closed down right now. The only people who can train in a gym right now are like Olympic athletes. Athletes, that's the only level. But training for professional MMA is not among the exemptions.
See, to me, that's where I would take issue with the mandates in your province. I think that's going too far.
But, as I said, they could be lifted hopefully by the end of January. So, it could be something that we could be on the tail end of. But when I saw that, I have the line here. It says, these measures include closing indoor sport and recreational fitness facilities, including gyms, except for athletes training for the Olympics and Paralympics, and select professional and amateur sport leagues or events. Training for professional MMA, I already said that. So, these time-limited measures will help in our fight against the virus and prevent hospitals from being overwhelmed.
Okay, you know what I'm going to say right now?
Ontario is crazy?
If they're worried about hospitals being overfilled to capacity, why don't they just work on building more capacity? Why are they trying to regulate everything in every part of your life?
true. And this is just Ontario. You can imagine other provinces down there in the States. There's probably a few states that are the same way. There's
Mm-hmm.
federal, like, coast-to-coast mandate for training in whether it's MMA or, any type of, like, sport like that where, there's no across-the-board thing. Everyone's individual, and that's the problem.
Yeah, well, welcome to the United States. It's the same thing here. Every state does it different. Every city does it different. Every governor does it different. Everybody does everything different. You want unity in policy? Go to someplace like France or Germany, where they don't make exceptions for anybody and everybody plays by the same rules, period.
Or China.
Not necessarily my first pick, but sure, they do. I'm not going to argue that they don't, but you think what you've got in your province is extreme? I think China would like to give you a little lesson in extreme.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Well, Stevie, what's on tap Thursday night?
We're going to talk about Red Dwarf Season 2, Episode 2, Better Than Life.
I might have to check that out. I think this weekend is going to be fun. The pay-per-view is going to be interesting. Next week we'll come back. We'll review what happened on Saturday. We'll preview Bellator and maybe, just maybe, some Royal Rumble talk. Who knows?
Maybe.
For Stevie J, I'm Peter H., the Hardcore Canadian. Thanks for listening. And as I always say, never leave it to the judges. Good night, everybody.
See ya.